Happy Sabbath. Last week, we talked about 5 of the last 7 plagues. And tonight, we're going to study the 6th plague. Let's go to verse 12 of chapter 16 of Revelation. The 6 angels pour out his bowl on the great river, the Euphrates, and its water was dried up, so that the way would be prepared for the kings from the east. This scene reminds us of the story in the book of Daniel. After God's people, having lived in Babylon as captives for many years, finally in BC 539, Cyrus the Great from Persia came with his armies and besieged the city. And because of Babylon's strong fortification and abundant supply of water and food, the people felt that the city was impregnable, and they believed no one could penetrate its thick, strong wall. However, on the night the leaders were having a drinking party in the palace of King Belshazzar, the city was captured by the Persian army, and this is recorded in Daniel chapter 5. Ancient historians stated that the Persians were able to get into the city because they diverted the Euphrates River. And I'm going to show you some picture of that. Euphrates River runs through the city. And so when they divert the water, they could enter the city through the dried riverbed and took hold of the city. And everyone was surprised. Because of Babylon's overthrow, Persian ruled the empire. And not long after that, Persian King Cyrus decreed God's people to return to their homeland. And this has a lot of ramification for what we're going to talk about in this 6th plague. Euphrates in Revelation is symbolic. Euphrates River is where the end-time Babylon dwells, according to chapter 17, which we're going to talk about it later. Let me read to you just to give you an understanding of what I'm talking about. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great whore who is seated on many waters." Right here, I'm just going to refer to the last part of this verse about the great whore who is seated on many waters. And the rest of these verses I will talk about later when we get to chapter 17. Great whore symbolizes the end-time Babylon, and water is synonymous to Euphrates River here. And it symbolized the national power of the world who would be in the service of this end-time Babylon. And the drying up of this Euphrates River in this verse echoes God's judgment on ancient Babylon, as I mentioned. So the symbolic drying up of this Euphrates signified accordingly that the secular power of the world or the nations of the world that is in service or support to this end-time Babylon will withdraw the support for this religious system. So what causes the withdrawal of the support to this system? Well, John didn't really explain, but scholars came to the conclusion that due to the outpouring of the 5 last plagues, which we talked about last week, and Babylon was impotent to protect her followers, so that her followers became disillusioned with Babylon, and so they unitedly withdraw their support from Babylon. And so the capture of ancient Babylon by Cyrus the Great is the background of the 6th plague scene. As in the case of ancient Babylon, so here the symbolic drying up of Euphrates River would result in the collapse of end-time Babylon. And end-time Babylon is the enemy of God and also enemy of his people. And this eventually will lead to what? Bringing God's people to their eternal homeland, the New Jerusalem. And in verse 12, it said that the Euphrates dried up for the kings from the east, right? Getting ready for the kings of the east. So who is this king of the east? Actually, it's a plural, kings. In the Old Testament, kings from the east or from the rising of the sun is an allusion to Cyrus the Great and his armies, whom I just mentioned. And this king overthrew ancient Babylon, right? And Babylon was the oppressor of God's people. And Cyrus the Great is referred by Isaiah as God's Messiah, which is recorded in Isaiah 45 verse 1. And this Messiah would come from the rising of the sun in 41 verse 25 of Isaiah. So like I mentioned, the word is kings, plural instead of singular. So who are the kings from the east? And Revelation clearly show that they are Christ and his armies of saints engaged in this final battle. But some think that these kings from the east are heavenly angels, because Jesus did say in Matthew 24:30-31 that at his coming, he will be accompanied by heavenly angel. In the Bible, however, angels never referred to as kings. And why in Revelation, God's people are called kings and priests, if you look back in chapter 1 verse 6 and chapter 5 verse 10. So this shows that the final battle of this earth's history will involve Christ and his faithful people on one side, and the satanic trinity and their followers on the other side. The satanic trinity will wage war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them. So that's a happy ending, because the Lamb is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called and chosen and faithful. This is recorded in Revelation chapter 17 verse 14. Now let's move on to verse 13 and 14. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits like frogs. Verse 14. For they are spirits of demons performing signs, which go out to the kings of the whole world to gather them together for the war of the great day of God, the Almighty. The drying of the Euphrates River symbolizes their loss of support, right? I just mentioned lost support from the world. And that triggers some action from the satanic trinity. The satanic trinity is the dragon, the sea beast, and the earth beast. Over here, the earth beast is referred to as the false prophet. So what kind of actions proceeding from the mouth of satanic trinity are 3 frog-like demonic spirits going out to the leaders of the world to gather them together for the war of the great day of the Lord, the Almighty. So what is this frog-like spirit? They reminds us of the frog plague in Egypt, Exodus 8, 1-15. If you recall, the frog plague was the last plague of Moses that Pharaoh's magicians were able to duplicate and use to influence Pharaoh to persist in his opposition to God, to reject God's message through Moses. And in light of this Old Testament background, the 3 frog-like demons of 6th plague are Satan's last attempt to counterfeit God's work. And this satanic system preaches falsehood and deceptions to go against the proclamation of the 3 angels' messages in Revelation chapter 14. And they use their false gospel with miraculous signs to convince the world's secular and political authorities and power to side with them, to go against God and his people in this preparation for the great day of God Almighty, which is called the final battle, the battle of the Armageddon. And Ellen White even warned the Christians. She said, fearful sights of a supernatural character will soon be revealed in the heavens, in token of the power of miracle-working demons. The spirits of devils will go forth to the kings of the earth and to the whole world to fasten them in deception and urge them on to unite with Satan in his last struggle against the government of heaven. By these agencies, rulers and subjects will be alike deceived. Persons will arise pretending to be Christ himself and claiming the title and worship which belong to the world's Redeemer. So the activities of the demonic trinity result in great success. The nation of the world are deceived again. They withdrew the support, and now they are supporting the system again. And they will unite with Satan to go against God's people. Now the stage is set for the last final battle. Let's read verse 15. Behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake and keeps his clothes, so that he will not walk about naked, and man will not see his shame. Well, John interrupts a moment the description of the demonic activities and inserts the words of Jesus, encouraging his people not to lose heart and not to lose focus on him in the midst of this great deception. He said, behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is he who stays awake and keeps his clothes, so that he will not walk about naked, and man will not see his shame. So this statement points to the true nature of this final battle. It shows that the final battle is not military, but spiritual. It is the battle for the minds and the hearts of people. So God's people must take it seriously, what is going to take place. By means of deceptive miracles, evil forces will win the allegiance of the earth's people. And they will exert a lot of effort to deceive even God's people. And that's why Paul said God's people must be spiritually awake, watchful, and ever ready to face the great deception. And this is recorded in 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 1 to 8. And Jesus, when he was on this world, he also encouraged his followers to stay awake and keep their garments on so that they do not walk around naked and so people do not see their shame. So let me clarify the background of this saying about keeping one's clothes on and not walking about naked. Well, the context is that back in Jesus' day, back in John's day, this is a practice in the Temple of Jerusalem. At night, the temple captain would check the guards of the temple gates, and if any guards were caught asleep at his post, his clothes would be stripped off and burned, and so he would be sent away naked in disgrace. So by alluding to this practice, Christ is urging his followers to be spiritually alert. They must be like the temple guards or soldiers, dressed and on the alert. With a similar admonition to his follower, Christ also said in the Mount of Olives, he said, be on the alert in case he should come suddenly and find you asleep. What I say to you, I say to all, be on the alert. This is in Mark 13:35 to 37. So in the context of Revelation, I will give you a further explanation of what it means to keep his clothes on. Remember Jesus' earlier appeal to the church of Laodicea that they need to clothe themselves with white garments so the shame of their nakedness will not be exposed. This is back in Revelation chapter 3, verse 18. And also back in Revelation chapter 3, verse 4 to 5, it says, "Yet you have still a few persons in Sardis who have not soiled their clothes. They will walk with me dressed in white, for they are worthy. If you conquer, you will be clothed like them in white robes, and I will not blot your name out of the book of life. I will confess your name before my Father and before his angels." So garments in Revelation symbolize uncompromising loyalty and faithfulness to Christ. And this also mentioned in chapter 6, verse 11, chapter 7, verse 9, and chapter 13 to 14. And they are the requirements to meet Christ when he comes the second time. On the other hand, nakedness means a compromising attitude toward the end-time Babylon. And those who compromises with Babylon will be humiliated and shamed. Only those who clothe spiritually with the robe of Christ's righteousness will be able to stand firm at the hour of trial that is about to come on those who dwell on the earth. And this is in Revelation chapter 3, verse 10. Now we are going to read verse 16. "And they gathered them together to the place which is in Hebrew called Armageddon." The deceptive, demonic miracles will achieve success beyond any prediction or expectation. In refusing the true gospel, people will believe lies, especially if they are accompanied by deceptive miracles. So the world power will gather at the place which is called in Hebrew Armageddon, meaning the mountain of Megiddo. So where is this place? In Old Testament, Megiddo was the fortress city located in the plain of Esdraelon. Esdraelon, also called the Valley of Jezreel. And it is at the foot of Carmel Ridge and between Mediterranean Sea and the Sea of Galilee. And the city on the great highway from Egypt to Damascus, providing a natural passage for the invasion of Palestine. So because of that, the city was an important strategic site. And the plain of Esdraelon, or the Valley of Jezreel, was known for many famous battles in ancient times. If you recall, Deborah and Barak, they defeated Sisera and his army there. You can find that in Judges 5, 19 to 21. Also, Gideon won the victory over Midians over there. And this is in Judges chapter 6, verse 33. And Saul was defeated by the Philistines there. And this is recorded in 1 Samuel 31. Ahaziah was shot by Jehu over there as well. 1 King 9:27. And Josiah was killed by the Pharaoh at the same site. This is recorded in 2 Kings 23, 29 to 30. So once again, Revelation uses familiar language from Israel's history to depict the final conflict between God and the forces of evil. And the satanic side are portrayed as demonic forces with number of 200 millions, in contrast to the 144,000 saints that belong to God. And this is reminiscent of Psalms 2:2. The kings of the earth take the stand, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed. The mountain of Megiddo was Mount Carmel, situated close to Megiddo, as you can see in the picture. Another picture, you see the tourists are standing on Mount Carmel, looking down at the valley of Jezreel. And Megiddo is located in the valley of Jezreel, or just now I mentioned, plain of Esdraelon. So it's the same. Valley of Jezreel, plain of Esdraelon is the same. And Megiddo is located in there. And Mount Carmel is one of the mountains located near the valley of Jezreel, as you have seen earlier in the map. And Mount Carmel, if you recall, was the site of one of the most significant battles in Israel history, involving the prophet Elijah and the prophets of Baal. If you want to see what it's all about, go back to 1 Kings chapter 18. The issue to be resolved in Mount Carmel was who the true God was, the Lord or Baal. And the fire that came from heaven to the earth demonstrated the Lord was the only true God to be worshipped. And in Revelation, in this final battle, however, the earth beast brings fire down from heaven to counterfeit God's work and trying to deceive the whole world. And the issue to be resolved in this final battle is the same as the one that Satan introduced at the beginning of the great controversy, namely, who is the legitimate ruler of the universe. Keep in mind that Armageddon is not a military battle fought in Palestine or elsewhere in the Middle East. Rather, it is a spiritual battle between Christ and his followers and the forces of darkness. And it is the battle for the minds of the people. As Paul said in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4 to 5. He said, the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but divinely powerful for the destruction of fortresses. We are destroying speculations and every lofty thing raised up against the knowledge of God. And we are taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. The outcome of the final battle will be like that of the Carmel conflict, Mount Carmel conflict. God will triumph ultimately over the forces of darkness. So what we've studied so far, verses 12 to 16, does not portray the actual battle, but only the great gathering of the religious and political powers to Armageddon. The actual battle follows the sixth plague and is described in Revelation chapter 16, verse 17, all the way to chapter 19, verse 21. John later sees the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gather to make war against Christ coming from heaven and accompanied by his armies of the saints. You'll see that in Revelation 19:19. And the battle will conclude with the defeat of the beast and his armies by the legitimate King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Happy Sabbath.